Let's have a session on 20 markers. This is for AQA A-level business. So we're going to go through tips, technique, and finish with a model answer. Let's start with tip 1. So tip 1 is know the command words. And for 20 markers, it's going to be to what extent. An example question could be, to what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X? X is the concept. It could be contingency planning. It could be cutting prices. To what extent means you need to evaluate and you need to make a conclusion. And with 20 markers, these will likely feature in paper 2 and paper 3. And therefore with 20 markers, you will have a case study and you must use it. When we're talking about evaluation, that relates closely to tip 2. So with evaluation, here's some types of evaluative braces you could use. It depends on, however, if X information was provided, it would be more certain. In the short term, in the long term. This may be the case in this industry, in this year, in this context, but not in this one. Tip 3, watch out for the dodgy word. It is common for these 20 markers to have a dodgy word planted in the question that you can evaluate and you can conclude off of. Examples, to what extent do you think it is essential for a business to do X? To what extent is X a profitable decision for all businesses, not just the business in that case study, all businesses? To what extent is X a good way for any business to react? Any business, not just the business in that case study. Note that, watch out for it. Tip 4, know the mark scheme, play the game. Logical chains are needed to show depth and range of knowledge. Logical chains must be in context and look at a balanced range of issues, two sides of an argument and two sides of contextual argument. Make a judgment that follows with the narrative built in the logical chains. Tip 5, your timing, 24 to 25 minutes. If you have additional time and it's 25%, then 30 minutes. So, firstly, master the suggested structure that's coming in a moment. And secondly, practice these questions under time constraints so you can get better at them. You can become an Olympian at 20 markers. Tip 6, fade. Fade in. Plan first before you engage with writing. To what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X? You see the question, you take a step back, and you do a fade. What are your 4 points? What are your against points? What's the dodgy word? Note it to yourself. And can you think of any quick evaluation points you might want to make throughout? Now let's move on to technique. So your technique is firstly, do a fade. Plan your answer just for a minute because it will help you. Because it will help you with point 2. Because in your first 2 sentences, answer the question, anticipate your conclusion. But you can only do that if you've planned it beforehand. Then start with your first logical chain. So on one hand, logical chain 1. Then make sure you evaluate that logical chain. And then 5, on the other hand, so take the other side of the argument, and then do another logical chain. And then 6, evaluate. You're evaluating that second logical chain, and then you want to make a conclusion, which is your A, J, K, O. Now, moving on to those logical chains. In this case, you're doing one on one side of the argument and another on the other side of the argument. Each of them will be with evaluation. So, logical chains. Make the initial point, paraphrase the question back to signal to the examiner that you know what's going on. Explain the point in depth. If you have to use because, leads to, furthermore, moreover, like a 12 marker, do it. And number 3, ensure the explanation is in context to the data, in context to the case study, in context to the industry. But also don't forget sometimes it could be about all businesses or any other businesses, so bring those in too. And 4, your final sentence, just as a rule of thumb, always try and curl it back to the precise question to make sure you're staying on the narrow path to victory. Then you need to do your evaluation. And just remember, it depends on, however in this industry, if this information was provided in the short term, in the long term, you know the business. Technique, A, J, K, O, that's your conclusion. Answer the question. Justify why. Provide support. Use application. Then state the key problem because you need to show some balance. You might want to do it depends on, or a trade-off that occurs. And then you finish up with the O, of the AJKO, which is overall, why is it the winner? Because with these 20 markers, there's going to be a winner. If the question was, to what extent do you think it is essential for the business to do X, then it's either going to be essential or not essential. Whichever way you go in your answer and your justification, you then need to explain why it's the winner, and that's your overall. But in your overall why it's the winner, you might want to talk about the short term or the long term. You might want to talk about any other industries here, anything to really power down and make it so clear why it's the winner. Now let's move on to some model answers. So here we've got a question from 2018, paper 3, question 5, about becoming an entrepreneur. I hope that helps, and I'll see you at the next sesh.